Hi, I'm Daniel Legis.
And I'm Chris Tetreault-Blay, and you're listening to Book 101 Review.
Yes, and Book 101 Review is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Chris Tetreault-Blay, my co-host.
Back at long last. Sorry it's taken me so long, but it's great to be back here again. Hope you're well, mate.
Yes, Mr. Chris, and thank you for your time. Yes, another month, another author to talk about. Go ahead.
So we're going to switch it up a little bit here because I was kind of thinking it's great to talk about authors and particular books and things like that. But as a writer, especially thinking back to my early days, it was really the community of writers that was just as important, if not more important to me, in terms of, actually feeling a part of something and inspiring me to write more. So I'm going to talk about three guys in particular who even though I've not met them physically, they were there for me. I conversed with them regularly. They became my kind of nucleus of authors that I really kind of came to depend upon for either support or inspiration. And that it's three guys who really played a big part in those early days for me as I was sort of starting out. So I would say in no particular order, really. I don't want to single any of them out, but this guy I will talk about first. He is a guy I still talk about today. I still talk to, here and there. And you listeners of Book 101 will know him as well. So I think it's only natural to start really by paying tribute to the great Richard Eyre. You've spoken to him many times about all of his books, and you can testify what a fantastic guy he is. And he was the reason I'm putting him first to talk about is really he was the first one when I had something that I thought, when I had a kernel of an idea that I may have a book that could do something. It was when I first got my publishing deal for Acolyte. Richard was the first author I really sort of came into contact with because he and I shared the same publisher for our debut novels. And I think the thing I look back on now with it is we were, because of where we can see that particular publisher has gone, the direction they've gone, we didn't really fit. We shared in writing horror fiction. We had the same kind of warped ideas and great ideas for books and stuff. And I think we both felt the same way at a certain point that our stuff didn't really belong there. So we went along and we've always supported each other and each other's work. And he was one of the first people I think to really, read and give me feedback on Acolyte once it was out. And he was one of those that I went back to each time that I had something that I was writing, that I was releasing. His opinion would really be valuable to me, even to this day. I think some of the things he said about my work that he's read that, hasn't been released yet, still gives me the inspiration to carry on. If I kind of feel like I'm losing the passion a little bit, I do kind of just go back to conversations I've had with him over the years. So, I probably don't need to go into much detail about his books. Again, the readers, they can. It's really great if you haven't heard him already to go back and listen to the episodes of Richard talking about his own work, because it's fascinating where he gets his ideas from. But Minstrel's Bargain, in particular, when I first read that, it blew me away. It really it combined two things that I was quite passionate about, with horror and heavy metal rock music, and I think finding someone who was writing the same, almost writing from my soul, as it were, really made me connect with him. And everything he's done since is just fantastic. I mean, you come up to Life Eternal is probably one of my favorite books ever that I've read, and I'm not just saying that to big him up even more. That is truly a stunning piece of work, that one. But yeah, I mean, your thoughts, I suppose, Daniel, from what you've
yes.
from when you've chatted to him, you would know.
And thank you for Mr. Richard Eyre, because without him, we are not connected right now.
Exactly. Well, there is that. Yeah, absolutely. He was the conduit between yourself and myself, and sort of brought me to to where I am today with you. So I mean, yeah, I can't thank him enough for that either.
Yes.
But yeah, he's just always been his writing is fantastic, and I think as you'll come to see when I talk about sort of all three guys I'm going to talk about today, it goes beyond the writing for me. You know, when you're a writer, you probably don't find as much time to read when you're writing yourself. So you may not get to read their work as much as you would like to, or as soon as you'd like to. So being drawn to a writer just through the kind of person they are is something else, really. I think it really gives you a whole new connection with the writing community when you are able to converse with fellow writers and bounce ideas off each other. And Richard and I even discussed, and this is probably something we'll hopefully go back to one day, but you know, it all depends on both of us having enough time to do it. But we were even going down the route of planning a crossover novel, you know, a collaboration, where I bring my character, the Trickerjack from A Necessary End, and the third Wildermoor book, and he was bringing Minstrel into it, and we were going to have the two of them meet and sort of see what dastardly deeds that they would come up with. So that just shows that level of connection I had with him, and how much I really, really value his friendship and support. Is that I really wanted to work with him, and still hope to one day if we can.
Yes, definitely. I see the connection.
Yeah.
Okay. He really referred to you as a guest also on my book 101. And okay,
He's too modest, that man. He really is.
Yeah. He is. And one of his favorite novel is A Life Eternal. So please, people, if you want to listen all my episodes, please do listen because they are phenomenal. Mr. Richard Ed discussed how he crafted all the books, what is the struggles, and what are the point when he's doing all the novels.
It is fantastic. It's fascinating to hear him talk about, as it is when I talk to any writers, really, seeing where some of these ideas come from and the slightest little, you know, it could be the smallest detail of something that's happened to them. And I think hearing him describe where some of these ideas have come from is great. And it just, there's inspiration in there of its own, I think.
Yes, I'm so glad, Mr. Chris, because I created this podcast because this is the podcast where you can relate to the authors. How did they come up with their novels? What are their struggles? How they come up with something that unique and people want to read.
Absolutely, and I think that's just as fascinating as reading the book. I think I really do.
Yes, and thank you for being my co-host.
Anytime, so it's a pleasure.
It's a blessing indeed. So after Mr. Richard Eyre, let's talk about your second author.
Yeah, so the next one who been part of my journey in sort of more ways than one, really, is a gentleman by the name of David McCaffrey. Some of you out there may or may not be familiar with him. He is, first and foremost, he's a fantastic writer. He kind of writes a little bit of horror in his books, but they're kind of horror, thriller, bit of sci-fi. It's a fantastic mishmash of all those genres. But if I go back right to the beginning, so my first sort of meeting, I suppose, with Dave McCaffrey was before I'd got Acolyte published, or due to be published by Bloodhound Books. I went down the route of sort of crowdfunding to try and get it published, and there was a particular publisher called Britain's Next Bestseller, who at the time they were offering indie authors like myself the opportunity to have their books published, or using their website as a platform. You could advertise your book. You promote it, you tell people about it. People could go on there and pre-order it. And if you got to a certain number of pre-orders, they would publish it. They would give you a publishing contract for that book, and they would go through and they would make sure it got out there. So I was trying to do that. And I it was during the time it was listed with Britain's Next Bestseller, and it wasn't really, I knew I wasn't going to reach the target I needed to get the publishing deal with them. But by that point, Bloodhound Books had already come to me, and offered me a deal with them. So I kind of knew I had that in the offing. But I already knew of Dave McCaffrey because he, I think, correct me, I may be wrong in saying this, but he was, I think, one of, if not the first person who achieved that goal with Britain's Next Bestseller. His debut Hellbound, published through them. So he was like almost like the figurehead of Britain's Next Bestseller for me back then. He was someone I really did aspire to straight away because he had reached that goal that I was so desperately searching for. And again, he is such, talk to him, he's so down to earth, and he does downplay his own talents a lot of the time. I read his book Hellbound. It's fantastic. It's just in a nutshell. I'm truly rubbish at summing other people's books up. I do apologize, but his sort of like a thriller, crime thriller, which is centered around a serial killer called Obadiah Stark. And there's the main character who is wanting basically to write Obadiah Stark's story through his final days up to his execution. As he's doing that, he starts to realize that there may be more to Stark's execution than meets the eye. While this is going on, you get a glimpse into Obadiah Stark's afterlife because you see what he's going through in the afterlife. And as you go through, you realize actually, like I say, his execution wasn't all that it seemed. You know, there is a lot more to the story, so to speak. Again, I don't want to spoil anything. I think people need to go out and read it. You can still get it. He's actually expanded it, I think, into a trilogy. I'm pretty sure he had 3 books of it. The Hellbound trilogy, and they're all fantastic. What he's able to do with that idea, and it's the idea that there is almost, you know, the afterlife exists, but there may be more to it than we all think, and it's really, really mind-bending stuff. And a few episodes ago when I was talking about a writer called Steve Alton, who is the author of the Meg series and the Mayan Prophecy series. During that episode, I think I did mention that Dave McCaffrey was mentored by Steve Alton as well, because Steve Alton was one of my favorite authors, and David's first book came from his mentorship that he received from Steve Alton. So knowing it had been shaped and endorsed even by some of Steve Alton just made it even more impressive. So David was always there. I kept in touch with him while I was trying to sort of carve my way through, you know, those initial months, the first year or so of being published, not really knowing what I was going to do in the next book, but it was all a little bit kind of, I didn't really know what direction I was going in with my books. I wasn't really going anywhere with the publisher I started out with. So I got to know him. I picked him as I put together a blog tour of my own when I was releasing the sowing season the first time round. And his opinion, his support meant so much to me that I asked him if he would host me on my blog tour. I arranged with him that I would appear on his blog. And back in those days, before podcasts exploded, you did author interviews were done in print. They were put on blogs, and it was you know, you read the interview. It was all in writing. It was one of those sort of things. He hosted me, and I wanted him to be the main event, the last stop on my blog tour, because I thought, you know, for me that was something I'd achieved in being able to sort of talk to him and have him, you know, support my work and promote my work for me. Forward another couple of years, I was looking for a new publisher for the Wildermoor Apocalypse trilogy, and by that point, Dave McCaffrey had actually taken over Britain's Next Bestseller. So he was now him and his wife had bought the company, so they now ran it. So I didn't feel like it was sneaking in the back door, kind of, you know, using friend support and things like that, because I knew that he did already think a lot of my writing. Him, and I said, would there be any chance that you'd be interested in taking and have repackaged? And we did. He took me in, so it came full circle, and I was at Britain's Next Bestseller. It was a really roundabout way, but I was almost back where I intended to be right at the beginning. And he helped push Acolyte and Sowing Season back out, packaged them, revamped them, gave them a new look. They looked fantastic. They're still my favorite, physical um, versions of the books. Unfortunately, we never got to the point that we could release the third one, and COVID and that got in the way. And eventually, that is at the point that I made the decision I was going to take my books back, because I really didn't know what I was going to do, whether I was even going to keep them out there or anything like that. I kind of became a bit disillusioned. But he was understanding enough that he allowed me to do that. We parted. We're still friends today. He's still writing, and he's one of those people who downplays his talents way too much. He said to me that he doesn't consider himself a great writer, great ideas. He's fantastic, and gives other authors, through Britain's Next Bestseller, he's given other authors that I know already, he's given them another chance to get their books out there. They may have had the same journey as me, where they've had books out there, they've had degrees of success. You kind of lose faith, you become really disillusioned, but he gives them that lifeline again and that rejuvenation to follow their dreams. And I think that's a really commendable thing. On this short list of people who are really important to me that have helped me some way in my journey, Dave absolutely had to be on there.
So before we go on, Mr. Chris, we want to shout out our ranking tops in the last 30 days according to Apple Chart.
Cool.
In Algeria, we are number 9, Mr. Chris. Libya, number 14. Jordan at number 17. Denmark at number 18. Romania at number 44. Cameroon at 52. United Arab Emirates at 109. Canada at 111, Hong Kong at 142, South Africa at 150, Mexico at 159, Georgia at 180, and Uganda at 221. Thank you so much for all those top 13 countries listening to us, because this podcast is created again to empower writers all over the world.
Yeah. Don't sell yourself short here, Daniel, as well. This is just a testament to the amount of work you put into this show. And I know you won't say it yourself, but seeing the amount of work you put in, the amount of guests you bring on, you really are the driving force behind all this, and your other podcasts as well. I don't know how you do it, mate. I really don't. Well.
Yes, people, I'm inviting you this June. We have a new podcast. I have a new podcast coming with Mr. Mike Lakes, Comedy 101. Comedy 101 is empowered to promote laughter, people. If Book 101 empower writers, this new podcast will create to make laughter, because laughter is the best medicine. Right, Mr. Chris?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that is fantastic. It's one thing I won't even say it's a guilty pleasure. I absolutely love comedy, whether it's films or stand-up comedy, and that, everybody, especially, within that is the most important thing. So, well done, mate. No, that's fantastic. I'll look forward to that one.
Yes. And so, Mr. Chris, if you compare Richard Eyre to David McCaffrey, what are the big difference in their writing?
Oh, wow. I don't know how to answer that one, really, because you look at Richard and where Richard came from, what he started with. He was very, it's horror. It's very, very British horror, which is fantastic. David McCaffrey does have, horrific things happen in his books and that, but it's not out and out that he writes. But Richard has shown that he can write outside that genre as well. So I think there's actually capabilities for them both to be very, very similar. So that's the glaringly obvious one, I think, is that Richard is the content that Richard has written, where he's gone down that total horror route is probably not one that I've seen David do so much. But both styles of writing are very, very similar. They're so immersive, both of them. And the interesting thing here is and the third author that I'll mention as well before we finish, all of these three guys live in the same part of the UK. They all live in the northeast, around sort of Newcastle and Middlesbrough kind of area. So I kind of think there must be something up there which is bringing this talent out. You know, it's like a hotbed. I probably need to spend some time up there myself.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I think there's definitely more similarities and differences. But I would say, yeah, that's probably it. Is that David? He delves very, very much into the sort of crime Richard does, but also David is put out a couple of fiction books based on altogether, although not very pleasant kind of experiences working in the NHS, because he is he's an infections nurse in the NHS. So during COVID, he has some very, very harrowing experiences by all accounts. But he's bringing that out in his writing as well. So I think, you know, he's putting obviously a lot of himself out there in his writing in a very visible way. But yeah, absolutely check them both out. You know,
Yes.
I can't say that.
So let's talk about your number 3 author.
Yeah, so this guy, I'll say at the beginning is I haven't seen anything from this guy for quite some time, but I had to put him up there because right at the beginning, again, crucial point of my writing journey, he was there, and we were at the same stage, sort of breaking out in the same genre, having the same struggles. It's a gentleman called Benjamin E. Sawyer. There's a few authors that I'm still friends with that will recognize and remember Ben. He, again, a bit like myself, I got to know him because I think he had his book, his debut novel, The Familiar, he had up on Britain's Next Bestseller. Again, using the same platform I was for Acolyte at the same time. So we found each other at that point. I think eventually he did manage to get his debut. He got The Familiar out there with Britain's Next Bestseller and followed it up with an equally fantastic horror book called Chasm. And that was it. I think whether he stopped writing or whether he just stopped putting books out there, I haven't seen anything released by him probably for easily about 7 or 8 years now, sadly. But I wanted to put him in there because he, at the time, I think a couple of years after I got published, I was sort of having issues of my own with other indie publishers, and sort of I was kind of thinking, you know what, it would be much nicer if we had more power ourselves as the authors, and we could put the books out ourselves. So that's where I started getting into self-publishing. And I had the idea, this was just before I created Dead Men's Tales Publishing for myself. I had the idea of a few of us, almost like a band of brothers, really, coming almost like a collective, not a full-blown publisher, but a collective where we could help create and publish each other's work. And the idea is that we would bounce ideas, we would critique each other's work. We'd read it, edit it, we'd put it out there, we'd support each other's work. And along with Richard, Ben was one of the ones that I wanted to have in that. It again didn't come to be. It was one of those ideas that kind of faded as soon as it was alive, really. But that's again how much I really connected with Ben, because we shared the same visions. We were writing about the same kind of stuff, not the same stories, but the same genre. I think we were of the same age. We had the same interest. It was fantastic in those early days to have someone like that around you that you can really kind of talk to, and just to kind of validate that you're doing something right, because there's other people out there that appreciate it, who really is great work that you love to read and promote as well. It is such a shame, I think, that we didn't see any more from him. I'm really hoping at some point he'll just bounce back on the onto the scene with another fantastic book. But it's like one of those, when you look at TV series and movies, you pray, some series are so good that you pray they don't go beyond where they should, and they don't go on too long. Maybe he saw that for his work. Maybe he was like, I'm happy with what I've done. I probably don't need to push it anymore. And I think there's a few of us that probably feel like we should have done that at some point as well. But but no, Ben, again, he's up there in the northeast of the country, and it must be something up there that creates these ideas, that drives real, true British horror writing. which fascinates me. So Ben, if you are listening to this, if anyone out there knows Ben, get in touch. It's been a long time, mate.
Yes, Mr. Benjamin, we are calling you to be our guest.
Yeah, that is absolutely. It'd be great. It'd be great to talk to him.
Yes, let's talk about your book or books. For Mr. Richard, Mr. David, and Mr. Benjamin, which part of your books related are they writing?
See, that's a hard one because I wouldn't say there's anything in particular I took from their writing, that I put in mind. But you can probably, around the time that they were all part of my journey, was when I was writing, between when I was writing the sewing season and the book that I worked on after that, which was Black Gang, which forms part of what is now A Necessary End. When I was writing that's the time that we were all we had this, I was part of this fantastic, rich writers community, which these guys were part of as well. So I think naturally, if you look back at that part of my work, that'll be the one where it's had some kind of direct influence, not necessarily from something I picked up from their work, but just for having them around. And I'd say that's probably when writing was the most fun, for when the horror writing at least was the most fun for me. And that's probably why once the community started disbanding a little bit, and everyone was going off and doing their own thing, and we probably weren't as close-knit as we once were, I started to lose a little bit of that, feeling like I had my place within the writing world, which then saw me go off in another direction. So yeah, I say that if we go back to the sewing season, that's the time that I was having the most fun. I would say because of these guys.
So let's do the recap of your Apocalypse trilogy, Mr. Chris.
Let's do that. Yeah, okay, yeah, the Wildermoor Apocalypse trilogy, if anyone's interested. Three books as it suggests. So you've got Acolyte, you've got the Sewing Season, and you've got Of Gods and Insects, which I will keep saying is still not out there at the moment, but it will be if you please bear with me. It's my take on what could have happened in December 2012 when the Mayan prophecy predicted that the world would end, and many of us did believe that something cataclysmic was going to happen in the world somewhere to bring about the end of days. Yeah, this is really my take, my very, very British, my rural British take on it. I base it in a moorland community far, far away from many other major towns and cities. So it's a community set very much on their own. But my vision of the end of days starts there. So that trilogy is really telling how it came about, why, how it was brought forth by dark events that happened in the late 1600s that reached a pinnacle in 2012. And that's sort of where the end of the series takes you up to. But yeah, if you like dark apocalyptic, there's no zombies in this really, but we're talking about sort of, demons and shadow figures and serial killers and, demonic henchmen from the underworld, then these might be the books for you. Yeah, I've got two children's books out. So the other part of my brain,
Yes.
the other part of my world. So I've got It's a Long Way to the Moon and It's a Long Night for Santa. They both center around my character of it's called the Little Brown Moth. These are rhyming picture books, perfect bedtime stories. If you like sort of beautifully illustrated rhyming books, bedtime stories, if you've got kids who just love looking at picture books and trying to read them for themselves and things like that, and like cute stories, animal stories, then hopefully you'll like these. And It's a Long Night for Santa obviously is a very seasonal one, but the time is upon us, probably sooner than we realize soon. So that one will be quite topical to talk about again. Finally.
Yes, definitely. So let's support Mr. Chris Tetreault-Blay Apocalypse trilogy because people, it will haunt you with the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, Mr. Chris, let's do the recap of your three authors that really influence you the most.
Yeah, so we start with Richard Eyre, the author of Minstrel's Bargain, Shadow of the Knife, Point of Contact, friend of the show. You will have heard him talk about his books and his influences as well on the many episodes he's done. If you haven't, go back and listen to them. The second one was David McCaffrey, author of Hellbound and Warmest Place to Hide. I didn't mention that one. That's as close as he's got to horror. That's a real kind of John Carpenter style horror trilogy he had going on there, which was fantastic. He's also the owner of the publishers Britain's Next Bestseller, who gave me a bit of a resurgence with the Wildermoor Apocalypse trilogy a few years ago. And Benjamin E. Sawyer. I say his full name because there's other authors out there called Ben Sawyer, so I'd hate for him to get lost in the mix there. But Benjamin E. Sawyer, the author of the fantastic indie horror novels The Familiar and Chasm, which I believe you can still get out there. I think you can still find them in ebook form. So I implore anyone, particularly out of all these three, Ben's work, because I don't think it got as widely recognized as it really should have done. So go out there and hunt his down as well. But yeah, Richard, David, Ben, thanks so much. If any of you are listening to this, thanks so much for supporting me and just being friends, really, and sort of helping inspire me along the way for so many years. I appreciate it.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Chris. So please, people, support my other podcast, Food 101, and we are very grateful with Chef Alessandro because we reached our 1 million downloads.
That is fantastic. That's what a thing to be able to say. That is absolutely fantastic.
Yes, thank you so much, people. If you are supporting my Food 101, can you please support also Book 101 Review, because this is good for a good cause. We are supporting writers out there to uplift themselves, to generate more books to come. Because if you support them, they will give their best.
They will. And I promise I will have something new to come on and talk about at some point.
Yes. So, Mr. Chris, please invite our listeners to buy all your books.
Yeah, then hop on Amazon. That's where you can find them all. So wherever you are in the world, you should be able to find my books on Amazon. If you put my name, Chris Tetreault-Blay, into the search, there is only one of me, but there are quite a few books on there. So my Wildermoor Apocalypse trilogy, A Necessary End, I haven't mentioned that. That's probably out of my horror stuff. That's possibly my favorite one. That was really, really fun to write. And my children's books. So whether you are a horror fan or a children's book fan, or even a horror fan with children, hopefully you can enjoy them all.
Yes. Are you planning to have an anthology soon?
Have an anthology? Oh yeah, I sort of a new release. You mean?
Yes, a new release.
Yeah, I am working on something, and I keep saying this. So I've got a follow up to Wildermoor Apocalypse. Whether it's going to be a trilogy or whether it's going to be one standalone book, I haven't quite decided. But I've got that in the works. But I've got a new anthology. So A Necessary End is my kind of anthology that I refer to. I have I've got some ideas I've been bouncing around for a sequel to that. And after a few days away that my wife and I had last week, I went away to York in the UK, and anyone who's been there knows that it is just a hotbed of history and ghost stories, and it is such, and it's you cannot come away, if you're a writer, you cannot come away from there without some kind of inspiration for new ideas, and that's exactly what's happened to me. So I am going to be hopefully working on that. I'm not going to spill any names or anything at the moment in case other things get in the way and I end up not doing it yet. But I really, one of those projects I want to have completed this year. So yeah, what it will be is it'll be a bit like A Necessary End. It will be sort of probably 5 or 6 shorter stories involving the Trick-a-Jack. I will say that. So any fans of the Trick-a-Jack stories that I've written in the past for A Necessary End, it'll be centered around those. There'll be some new ones of those, and a new backstory, a new chapter in the Trick-a-Jack and Courtney story. But that's as far as I'm going to describe it at the moment. Again, in case it all goes sideways once more.
Okay, Mr. Chris, thank you for your time.
No problem. Thanks again, mate. Anytime. More to come, people.
See you soon.
Bye.